The afternoon felt quiet in the small town of Pine Hollow. The winter sun hung low and soft, and the street lamps still looked sleepy. A little boy named Sam walked home from the library with a thin book hugged to his chest. He was 8 years old, small for his age, and he liked reading about animals more than anything. His mom had told him to take the safe road by the bakery, then turn left near the old fountain. Sam always listened, because he was the kind of kid who believed rules were there to protect people. He liked the smell of warm bread, the sound of birds on the wires, and the feeling that his town knew him. Pine Hollow was the kind of place where the mail carrier waved at everyone, and shop owners remembered your name. Sam stepped off the curb carefully, watching for cars, then walked along the sidewalk near the park fence. The park was empty except for a few leaves rolling like tiny wheels across the ground. A wind moved through the bare branches, and the swings creaked in a slow rhythm. Sam glanced toward the pond, thinking about the ducks that came in spring. He imagined writing a school report about how animals survived cold weather. He did not notice the dog at first because it stood behind a trash bin near the park gate. It was medium-sized with rough fur and a thin look, like it had not eaten well for some time. Its ears were alert, and its eyes stayed fixed on Sam in a way that made the air feel tight. Sam slowed down because he remembered something from his animal book. He remembered that sudden moves could scare a nervous animal. He kept walking, trying to look calm, and he held his book a little higher. The dog stepped out from behind the bin, and its paws clicked on the pavement. Sam stopped near the fence and looked around for an adult. He saw no one close enough to call quickly. He heard the dog's low sounds, and his stomach turned cold. Sam took one slow step back, then another, trying to create space. The dog moved faster than Sam expected, and the moment changed from quiet to frightening. Sam lifted his arm to protect himself, and his book slipped from his hands onto the sidewalk. He stumbled and fell near the fence, and the dog lunged toward him with quick, panicked energy. Sam cried out, not with big words, but with a sharp sound that came from pure fear. He curled his body the way his teacher had once shown during a safety talk. He tried to stay still, but his hands shook as he covered his head. The dog snapped and scratched in the struggle, and Sam felt a stinging pain on his arm and shoulder. It was not a long moment, but it felt endless to Sam. At the same time, a woman named Nora stepped out of the bakery across the street. Nora was in her 30s and worked mornings to help her father run the shop. She heard Sam's cry and saw the movement near the park gate. Her face changed instantly, and her body moved before her mind finished thinking. She ran across the road, waving one arm high to stop traffic, and cars slowed with loud brakes. Nora grabbed a metal tray from the bakery door that she had been carrying outside for a delivery. She shouted loudly to pull attention and to startle the dog away from the boy. The dog turned its head at the sharp sound, confused for a heartbeat. A man named Rafi, who owned the hardware store next door, saw Nora sprinting and followed her. Rafi was tall, strong, and steady in emergencies because he had raised 3 kids of his own. He picked up a broom that was leaning outside his shop, then ran with it in both hands. Rafi did not swing wildly, because he did not want to make the animal more desperate. He stepped in front of Sam like a wall and used the broom to create distance. Nora struck the metal tray against a pole, making a loud ringing sound. The dog backed away, still tense, but suddenly unsure. It turned and ran along the fence line, then disappeared behind the trees at the far side of the park. Sam stayed curled for a moment, frozen by shock. Nora dropped to her knees beside him and spoke in a calm, firm voice. She told Sam he was safe and that he needed to breathe slowly. Rafi knelt too, keeping his eyes on the park, watching for the dog to return. Sam lifted his head and looked at Nora with wide, wet eyes. His arm was scraped, and his jacket sleeve was torn, and he looked smaller than ever. Nora carefully helped him sit up, making sure he did not move too quickly. Rafi took off his own scarf and wrapped it gently around Sam's arm to cover the scratches. A few people began rushing over from nearby shops and parked cars. Someone called the town clinic, and someone else called Sam's mom. A teenager named Leo, who worked part-time at the bakery, ran out with a clean towel and a bottle of water. Nora pressed the towel lightly against Sam's arm and kept speaking in a steady tone. She asked Sam his name, and where he lived, and if he could move his fingers. Sam answered in short words because he was trying not to cry again. He said he was going home, and he said he dropped his book, and he said his mom would worry. Nora nodded and told him his mom would be with him soon. Within minutes, the sound of a car door slamming echoed from the street. Sam's mom, Mira, ran toward the park gate with fear written across her face. Mira was a nurse at the clinic, and she understood injuries, but she still looked shaken like any parent would. When she saw Sam sitting upright, she rushed to him and held his shoulders tightly. Sam leaned into her, trembling, and Mira checked his arm and shoulder with careful hands. She thanked Nora and Rafi in a voice that cracked at the edges. Rafi told Mira that Sam was brave and that the dog was gone for now. Mira nodded, still looking around as if danger might jump back out from behind the trees. Small police car arrived next, and an officer named Hassan stepped out quickly. Hassan had grown up in Pine Hollow and knew most families by sight. He asked what happened, and people spoke at once, pointing toward the far end of the park. Hassan took notes, then asked if anyone had seen the dog before. A woman from the flower shop said she had seen a similar dog behind the dumpsters 2 days earlier. A man from the gas station said he had heard barking at night near the old railway path. Hassan listened carefully, then radioed for animal control from the nearest city. He promised the town that they would search the area and keep children away from the park until it was safe. Mira helped Sam stand, and Nora picked up Sam's fallen book from the sidewalk. The cover was bent, and there was dirt on the pages, but the title was still visible. It was a book about animal behavior and how fear can change an animal's actions. Nora looked at the book and felt something heavy settle in her chest. She had seen the dog's eyes for a brief moment, and she did not see pure cruelty there. She saw hunger, stress, and a kind of wild panic. That did not excuse what happened, but it made the situation feel more complicated. Nora knew the town would be angry, and she understood why. As Mira led Sam toward her car, the crowd began to split into different groups. Some people spoke in tight voices about catching the dog quickly. Some people argued about whether the dog was owned by someone careless. Others wondered if it had been abandoned outside town. A few blamed the park for having open bins and leftover food that could attract animals. Hassan tried to calm everyone and told them to give clear information instead of fear. But fear moves fast in a town, especially when a child is hurt. The story was already spreading from phone to phone, from window to window, from shop to shop. That evening, Pine Hollow felt different. Parents locked gates that had been open for years. Kids who usually biked in groups stayed inside, pressed close to living room windows. Neighbors gathered on porches, talking in low voices, watching the dark edges of the street. At the clinic, Mira sat with Sam while the doctor cleaned his scrapes and checked him carefully. Sam stayed quiet, staring at the ceiling, as if he was still trying to understand how a normal walk turned into a nightmare. Mira held his hand and told him he was safe now, but she was also thinking about the dog. She was thinking about how quickly anger could rise, and how the town might demand a simple answer to a complicated problem. Across town, Nora closed the bakery early and sat with her father in the back room. She told him everything, and her father listened with his hands folded, his face serious. He said the town would want action, and action would come, but they needed to be smart. Nora kept hearing Sam's cry in her mind, and she kept seeing the dog's panicked movements. She wondered where the dog was hiding, and what it had lived through, and why it was so desperate. She also wondered who would be brave enough to face the town's fear and still think clearly. Because she could feel it already, like thunder behind a hill. What happened next would not just be about finding a dog, but about what kind of town Pine Hollow truly was. Morning came to Pine Hollow with a heavy quiet that felt unusual for the town. The sun rose slowly, but the streets stayed empty longer than normal. Parents kept their children close, and school buses arrived with fewer laughs inside. Sam stayed home, resting on the couch with a blanket and his book beside him. His arm was wrapped carefully, and his movements were slow but steady. Mira stayed nearby, pretending to read messages on her phone while watching him closely. She smiled when Sam asked for cereal, because it meant his spirit was still strong. News of what happened had reached every corner of the town by sunrise. People talked about it in shops, at doorways, and over fences. Some voices were sharp with fear, and others were tight with anger. Many people said the dog must be found quickly before something worse happened. A few people asked where the dog came from and why no one noticed it sooner. Those questions did not calm the louder voices that demanded action. Pine Hollow was not used to feeling unsafe, especially not about its children. Officer Hassan met with town leaders near the community hall. They stood around a wooden table with maps spread across the surface. Hassan marked the park, the railway path, and the nearby woods with a pen. Animal control teams were on their way from the city, but they would arrive later in the day. Until then, Hassan asked for calm and careful reporting of sightings. He reminded everyone that panic could lead to mistakes. Some nodded in agreement, but others crossed their arms and looked away. Rafi opened his hardware store late that morning. He kept the door unlocked but stood near it, watching the street. Customers came in not for tools, but for news. They asked him what he saw and how close the danger felt. Rafi answered honestly and told them Sam was recovering. He also told them that fear would not help anyone think clearly. Some listened, and some left shaking their heads. Nora walked to the park fence alone after breakfast. The swings were still and quiet, and the ground showed no sign of yesterday's struggle. She stood there thinking about how quickly life could change in a single moment. She remembered Sam's small body curled near the fence. She remembered the dog's eyes filled with panic rather than purpose. Those memories stayed with her like weight on her chest. Nora knew people would want a simple story with a clear villain. At the bakery, customers spoke while waiting for bread. Some said the dog should be taken away as soon as possible. Others worried about how children would feel walking past the park again. A woman asked if stray animals were becoming a problem near town. Nora listened quietly while wrapping loaves in paper. She wanted to speak, but she also knew timing mattered. Right now, the town was not ready for careful thinking. By noon, animal control vehicles arrived at the edge of Pine Hollow. 2 workers stepped out wearing calm expressions and simple uniforms. They spoke with Hassan and studied the map together. They asked questions about sightings and food sources around the park. They moved slowly, checking bins and paths without rushing. Their approach frustrated some people who wanted quick results. Hassan stayed firm and told everyone to give them space. At the clinic, Sam sat up and asked if he could draw. Mira brought him paper and colored pencils from the supply room. Sam drew the park, the fence, and the dog, but he made the dog smaller than before. He added trees and birds around it, making the scene feel calmer. Mira watched quietly, letting him express what words could not yet hold. She noticed Sam did not draw angry lines or dark colors. Instead, he used soft shades and left space between shapes. Later that afternoon, a meeting was announced at the community hall. Parents, shop owners, and workers filled the room quickly. The air felt tense, like a storm waiting to break. Hassan stood at the front and explained what was being done. He asked for patience and cooperation until the search was complete. Some people raised their hands with questions that sounded more like demands. They wanted guarantees that nothing like this would happen again. Nora stood near the back, listening carefully. She watched faces tighten when fear turned into anger. When Hassan finished speaking, the room buzzed with voices. A man suggested closing the park permanently. Another person blamed careless feeding of animals. Someone else said the dog must be dangerous by nature. Nora felt her hands shake, but she stepped forward anyway. She spoke calmly and clearly so people would hear her. She said she saw what happened and helped protect Sam. She said Sam was brave and that the town came together quickly. Then she spoke about the dog, choosing her words with care. She said fear can make animals act in ways they normally would not. She reminded everyone that understanding a problem helps prevent it from returning. The room grew quieter as people listened. Not everyone agreed with Nora. Some crossed their arms and looked toward the floor. But a few nodded slowly, thinking about what she said. Rafi spoke next and supported her words. He said Pine Hollow had always solved problems together. He said rushing toward anger could hurt more than help. Those words softened the room a little. Outside the hall, children waited with parents. They held hands and listened through open windows. Sam stood near Mira, watching people talk with serious faces. He did not feel scared at that moment, but he felt changed. He understood that one event could shift how adults spoke and moved. He wondered if the dog was still afraid somewhere nearby. That thought stayed with him quietly. As evening approached, Animal Control reported finding signs near the railway path. They believed the dog was hiding there, avoiding noise and people. They planned to set up safe traps with food and water. Hassan announced the update to the town with careful words. Some people felt relief, while others felt impatience. The night came with watchful eyes and locked doors. Nora closed the bakery and walked home slowly. She thought about how towns remember events long after they pass. She wondered what story Pine Hollow would tell about this moment. Would it be a story of fear or of learning? She hoped Sam would heal not just in body but in spirit. She hoped the town would choose understanding over blame. At home, Sam finished his drawing and handed it to Mira. He pointed to the small dog shape and said it looked lonely. Mira hugged him tightly, holding back tears. She realized her son had already begun to see beyond fear. Outside, the town waited for answers, unaware that change had already started. The third day began with gray clouds hanging low over Pine Hollow. The air felt tense, as if the town itself was holding its breath. People stepped outside cautiously, scanning the streets before moving on with their routines. The park remained empty, taped off with bright lines that fluttered in the wind. Birds still gathered on wires, unaware of the worry below them. Animal Control returned to the railway path early in the morning. They moved quietly, placing food and water near the bushes. They avoided loud voices and sudden movement. They wanted the dog to feel less threatened. Hassan stood nearby, watching with patience. He knew fear could turn small mistakes into big problems. Tracks appeared near the food by midday. Soft marks pressed into the dirt showed careful steps. The dog had come close but did not stay long. Animal Control workers shared calm looks with each other. They believed the dog was watching them from somewhere hidden. They adjusted the traps and waited. In town, conversations shifted from anger to worry. People asked what would happen if the dog could not be caught. Parents wondered how long their children would stay indoors. Shop owners worried about losing customers. The event was no longer just a story but a weight on daily life. Sam returned to school for a short visit that afternoon. His teacher welcomed him gently and asked classmates to be kind. Sam walked slowly through the hallway, noticing every sound. Some kids stared at his bandaged arm. Others whispered and asked questions. Sam answered quietly, choosing simple words. During art time, Sam drew again. This time, he drew the town with houses close together. He added people standing side by side. In the corner, he drew the dog smaller but clearer. The dog was no longer jumping or moving fast. It was sitting and watching. The teacher noticed Sam's drawing and knelt beside him. She asked what the picture meant. Sam said the dog looked scared, not bad. The teacher nodded and thanked him for sharing. Those words stayed with her longer than she expected. After school, Mira met with other parents outside the building. They spoke in lower voices than before. Some admitted they were tired of feeling afraid. Others said they wanted answers, not anger. Mira listened and shared Sam's thoughts gently. She did not force opinions, only offered perspective. Nora spent the afternoon preparing food packages at the bakery. She planned to give them to animal control workers. She believed small kindnesses could calm tense moments. When she arrived near the railway path, she moved slowly. She placed the food down and stepped back without speaking. The dog appeared just before sunset. Its body was thin and tense, and its fur looked rough. It stood at a distance, watching every movement. Animal Control stayed still, lowering themselves to seem less threatening. The dog edged forward, drawn by hunger and caution. For a moment, the town held its breath again. Then the dog stepped into the trap gently, without panic. The door closed softly behind it. The dog jumped once, then froze, eyes wide. Animal control covered the trap quickly to reduce stress. News spread through Pine Hollow within minutes. People gathered near their windows and doors. Some felt relief wash over them. Others felt a quiet sadness they did not expect. The danger had passed, but the questions remained. The dog was taken to a quiet shelter outside town. A vet examined it and found signs of long hunger and fear. No signs showed it was naturally aggressive. It had likely been abandoned far from any home. That knowledge changed how the story sounded when told. Hassan announced the update at the community hall that evening. The room felt calmer than before. He explained that the dog would be cared for and evaluated. He thanked everyone for patience and cooperation. The words sounded heavier than before because they mattered now. People spoke differently after that. Some admitted they felt wrong for assuming the worst. Others said fear made them forget compassion. Rafi said the town had learned something important. Nora nodded quietly, feeling both relief and responsibility. Sam listened to the updates from his couch at home. He leaned against Mira and asked where the dog would go next. Mira said the dog would rest and heal. Sam said he hoped the dog would feel safe. Mira hugged him and smiled through tired eyes. That night, Pine Hollow slept better than it had in days. Lights turned off earlier. Doors unlocked slightly. The town was still changed, but not broken. People understood now that fear could teach as much as it could harm. As clouds drifted apart and stars returned, a quiet truth settled in. What happened was not only about a boy and a dog. It was about how a town faced fear and chose its response. And that choice would shape what came next. The next morning in Pine Hollow felt lighter than the days before. People still spoke about the incident, but their voices were softer and more careful. The park tape still hung on the fence, yet the fear in the air had thinned. Shop doors opened on time, and the smell of coffee and bread returned like a familiar song. Parents still held small hands tightly, but they also began to breathe again. At the shelter outside town, the dog rested in a quiet room. The workers kept the lights low and the sounds gentle. A vet named Dina checked the dog again and spoke in calm words to the staff. She said the dog was not a monster, but an animal pushed too far by hunger and stress. She said it needed time, steady care, and a safe plan before any big decisions were made. The shelter team agreed, because they had seen many frightened animals act in sudden ways. Officer Hassan visited the shelter with a notebook in his pocket. He wanted to know the full story, not just the loudest version the town had created. Dina showed him the records, the small marks of recovery, and the signs of long neglect. Hassan listened and nodded, then thanked the staff for handling the situation with care. He knew his job was not only about stopping danger, but also about helping the town stay fair. Back at home, Sam sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and a pencil in his hand. His bandage was smaller now, and his eyes looked less tired. Mira watched him from the counter, acting normal, but still checking his face often. Sam asked if the dog had a name. Mira said the shelter had not named it yet, because they were waiting to see what kind of future it would have. Sam nodded, then said the dog should have a name that meant calm. Later that day, the community hall opened its doors again for a town meeting. This time the room filled with fewer angry voices and more listening faces. Hassan stood at the front and shared what the shelter vet had explained. He spoke about fear, hunger, and how quickly panic can lead to harm. He also spoke about responsibility, because the town still needed better safety steps. People nodded, because it was easier to think clearly now that the danger had passed. Nora sat beside Rafi near the middle row. She held a small paper bag of bakery rolls, as if food could keep the room warm. When Hassan finished, Nora raised her hand and stood. She suggested a simple town plan that would help prevent future problems. She suggested sealed bins near the park, clear signs, and a hotline number for stray sightings. She also suggested a volunteer group to help the shelter with supplies and transport. The room grew quiet, then people began to agree one by one. A parent named Kamal stood next and admitted something difficult. He said he had spoken with anger at first because fear made him feel powerless. He said he was grateful the town protected Sam, and he was also grateful they did not rush into choices they might regret. His honesty changed the mood of the room. Other people began sharing similar feelings, and the meeting shifted from blame to problem-solving. After the meeting, the town started moving like a team again. Rafi offered tools and materials to help build stronger bin covers near the park. Nora offered leftover bread for the shelter team on weekends. A teacher offered to add a short animal safety lesson to school activities. Hassan offered to coordinate updates so rumors would not spread faster than facts. In small ways, Pine Hollow began turning fear into a plan. Sam returned to school full-time at the end of the week. His classmates no longer stared as much, and his teacher praised his courage without making him feel like a display. During reading hour, Sam chose a book about how animals learn trust over time. He read slowly, but he paid attention to every page. He started noticing how many animal stories were really about people too. One afternoon, Dina from the shelter called Mira at the clinic. Dina said the dog was improving and eating well. Dina said the dog still startled easily, but it was not acting wild anymore. Dina said they wanted to find a safe long-term home, and they wanted it to be the right fit. Mira thanked her and asked if there was any safe way for Sam to see the dog from a distance. Dina said it could be possible, as long as it was calm and supervised. On Saturday, Mira drove Sam to the shelter with Nora in the passenger seat. Hassan also came, because he wanted everything to be safe and steady. Sam held his drawing folder on his lap the whole ride. When they arrived, Dina greeted them with a gentle smile. She led them to a fenced area where the dog could be seen without pressure. The dog stood on the other side of the fence, watching quietly. Its posture was different now, less tight, and its eyes looked more curious than panicked. Sam did not move fast, and he did not speak loudly. He simply sat on a bench and placed his drawing folder on his knees. Mira stayed close, ready to step in if Sam felt overwhelmed. Nora watched with careful attention, proud of Sam but also respectful of his feelings. Sam opened the folder and lifted a drawing toward the fence. It showed a small dog sitting under a tree with birds above it. The dog in the drawing was not scary, just tired and alone. Sam held the paper steady, as if he wanted the dog to understand without words. Dina watched the dog's reaction and nodded slowly. The dog took a few careful steps forward, then stopped, then sat down. No one rushed the moment, because rushing was what caused fear before. After a while, Dina spoke softly and asked Sam what name he had thought of. Sam said the name should be Peace. Nora smiled, and Mira pressed her lips together as her eyes warmed. Hassan wrote the name down, as if it mattered enough to record. Dina said Peace was a good name, because names can be the first step toward a new story. Over the next 2 weeks, the shelter continued training and careful evaluation. Peace learned routines and began trusting quiet voices. The town volunteer group delivered supplies and helped on cleaning days. People who once spoke in anger now donated blankets and food. The change did not erase what happened, but it reshaped what it meant. Then a family from the edge of town came forward. They were calm people with an older teen and a large fenced yard. They had experience caring for nervous animals, and they agreed to follow every safety rule. Dina approved the plan after careful steps. Hassan supported it after reviewing the details. Mira agreed after asking the right questions. Sam listened quietly, then nodded with a serious face. On the day Peace left the shelter, Pine Hollow felt a strange kind of unity. Nora brought bread for the shelter staff. Rafi helped install a stronger latch on the new yard gate. Hassan checked the paperwork and thanked everyone for staying steady. Sam stood beside Mira and watched as Peace walked into the new home without pulling away. Peace looked back once, then moved forward, like it was choosing hope. That evening, Sam walked past the park with Mira for the first time since the incident. They stopped at the fence and listened to the wind in the branches. Sam did not flinch, because he felt stronger than before. Mira squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. Pine Hollow was still the same town, but it had learned something important. It had learned that fear is loud, but care can be louder when people choose it. And long after the story spread, the real shock was not what happened in the park. The real shock was how the whole town decided to change together.